Welcome to the MS Dev Show, episode number 181. This week we talk with Stefan Wick about the desktop bridge tooling, what is a security.txt file, and how a side project helped me double my salary.
Raygun gives you complete visibility on errors, crashes, and performance problems affecting your end users. Replicate issues in seconds rather than digging through log files or having to rely on users to report errors or crashes. Raygun gives you a window into how users are really experiencing your software applications. Check it out today at raygun.com.
This week we have Stefan Wick, Program Manager Lead on the Windows Platform team. His responsibilities include the Windows app model for UWP and Win32, including the desktop bridge tooling and platform, formerly known as Project Centennial. How's it going, Stefan?
Pretty good. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, our pleasure. Carl, you bought something?
Yeah, so I'm one of those people that constantly go back and forth about wires on my accessories for my computer, and I'm back in the wired camp right now. So I bought the Microsoft Classic IntelliMouse recently to replace my Logitech MX Master. I was getting sick of the MX Master. Like every 3 days I would have to charge it. And it's just one of those charging periods where it's just enough time where you forget about it, so you don't constantly charge it, but it's not long enough where it feels like it's a pain to constantly do. So I went out and got the Classic IntelliMouse, and its design and simplicity, it does everything you want a mouse to do. And it has a wire, so I don't have to think about charging it. So, it's one of those things. Probably a year from now, I'll try to find something wireless because I don't like the wires on my desk. But, we do try to keep people up to date with, what are our decisions on hardware as well.
Yeah, and actually, I'll give you an update on mine. Mine is like super simplistic because my MacBook has a USB-C connection into a dock. The dock connects a monitor, and it connects like Ethernet and some other things that also charges it. But the keyboard that I'm using is actually the built-in keyboard in the MacBook, and the mouse I'm using is actually the trackpad in the MacBook. And one of the reasons why, probably 50% of the reason why I actually switched over to the MacBook is because the trackpad is so good. And this one has the gigantic trackpad on it, but my right wrist hurts frequently. So I actually switch between my right and left hand on this. So it's like an ergonomic thing, which I know sounds kind of weird because I was using a vertical mouse for a while. But that only sort of delayed the inevitable. My wrist was still hurting. So the trackpad actually works out pretty good. And then I actually change my environment as well. Like sometimes I'm at my desk, sometimes I'm sitting like in a lazy boy recliner, and I'll work on that instead. And that's really helping just, use like different wrist positions. Cause I think that's the key, is just like always, be like sort of doing things differently. If you're doing anything repetitive, you're going to have those repetitive injuries. And then at work, I have a 4K monitor at home, and then I have one at work. I have the exact same monitor. I have the exact same setup. So it's really nice. I can sort of do the exact same thing either way.
But that really helps when your setups are identical.
Yeah. And I'm in this camp, like, it's funny because a lot of people have like a desktop and a laptop computer. I'm a huge fan of, I want to have like the most powerful laptop that I can possibly have and just use the same machine. Because then all my stuff is there and it's all set up the way that I want. And then again, like using the same keyboard, like when I'm traveling or on the road versus like when I'm in the office versus when I'm at home, is actually a productivity boost, because, you have all that muscle memory for keyboards and the mouse that you're using. And it's not that I don't have this issue then when I'm on the road, like, oh, I have to use this stupid trackpad. I'm just like, oh, I'm just doing this exactly the way that I'm always doing it. So.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm the same way. All laptop all the time, even if I sit in my office. For some reason, I'm just always attached to the laptop.
Yeah, it's just so much easier just having one device and just not even having to really think about it. Cool. Okay, so what do we have for the comment of the week, Carl?
This week's comment of the week comes from Michael Sage on our website. He replied to the episode we did about the streaming live coding sessions with Suze Hinton. And he said, when I'm not sleeping through your podcast early on Saturday morning, I'm generally doing things around the house like making a crazy concoction of pharmaceutical and herbal medicines for my son who has autism, which is quite tedious. As you mentioned, the need to have something to listen to during a task like this, and when we mentioned that, he started to laugh, and this is what he was in the middle of. And he sent us a picture, and he's got actually a bunch of medicines, a mortar and pestle, just lots of vials and tinctures of stuff. Yeah, some fruit. So he is definitely doing a bunch of stuff for his son, which kudos on being an awesome dad to do all that stuff. Mixing your own medicines is not easy.
Yeah. I thought this was going to be a horrible comment the way it started out when I'm not when I'm not sleeping through your podcast early on a Saturday morning. So, yeah.
But yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and they're pretty much always when I'm doing chores or, doing something where I have my brain free, but my hands are busy.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want to get mentioned on the show, just like Michael did, send us an email to feedback@msdevshow.com, comment on Facebook, YouTube, or Stitcher. And we really like those 5-star iTunes reviews. And I've checked and we haven't had any in a while. So come on, send us some reviews that way.
Awesome. Yeah, because we have, it's like 1% of people listening do that. So yeah, we really like those. Okay, let's jump into the news. How a side project helped me double my salary. This is very relevant because we were just talking about this a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So, I'll let you, as listeners, go to the show notes and read this exact story, but I've always had a side project. And Jason, I know that you've got a side project too, that we'll probably talk about. Mm-hmm. But I will say that a side project helped get me my first technical job. And this is something that maybe Jason will remember. And, he was interviewing me. And in the middle of it, I started talking about some code that I had written. In fact, a lot of my coworkers give me a lot of crap for this one-off app that I have. But I asked, hey, do you mind if I go to my car and get my laptop with the code? And we did a code review of this side project that I had. And me, as somebody who's never had a tech job before, and Jason at the time was a CTO of a company, he was going through my code. He's like, why'd you do this? That's not right. And I'm like, well, and then I argued this is why I did it like this. So I had the passion for the project, and that was enough to give me, the confidence to stand up to, normally you're a little bit intimidated when you're a junior dev and you're talking to a CTO about a code resource. You might just automatically bow, but because I had that, I was so engrossed in my code, I was able to stand up for the decisions that I made.
Mm-hmm. And I have two comments, one that I've made before, which actually I think I've made both before. So I apologize. but the first one is that I'm convinced that no matter what project you do on the side, somehow there's this weird phenomenon where it will become immediately relevant at work. And I don't know if it's a causal relationship or if it's just, that effect where you see everybody else who has the same kind of car as you. But if I were to, let's say I were to write some obscure thing in Go, for whatever reason, at work, I would have a partner, they're like, hey, I have this project in Go and I'm trying to solve this problem. And it's I just solved that yesterday on this thing I was building for my house. So there's that phenomenon that happens all the time. So, I feel like side projects are never a waste of time. They have a personal benefit and then they also have a work benefit. And then the other comment I'm going to make is just whenever we do interview people, I interview a lot of people that are for internships. And I would say that if you have a fair amount of code on GitHub that you have written, you have, and don't hold me to this, but you have a 9 or 9 times out of 10, I will put you through to get that internship. Probably even more than that. I would say probably probably even better odds than that. And I even had one person come in this last round of intern interviews, and he had written, he's like, oh, I've been contributing back to, it was Node or something similar. And he had just a ridiculous number of projects that he had built on GitHub. And he was contributing to all these major significant contributions. He had pull requests and there were discussions around it. This is an intern who is already supporting all of these communities out there. And that was just amazing. So it's you barely even have to talk to that person. In fact, he had some interviews before that and they had all these glowing reviews. So it was more of hey, what, where's this journey taking you? Where do you want to be? And, it was more coaching at that point, because it was obvious that we were going to, offer him an internship. So yeah, side projects are always great. Okay. Google now has a security.txt file. So should you. What is that file?
So we're familiar with robots.txt. We've talked about on the show humans.txt.
Yep.
And now if you go on and click this link in the show notes, it's security.txt. And this is an article by Troy Hunt. So obviously anything named security.txt coming from Troy Hunt who has a security background, he's going to have some interesting insights to this. So one of the things that if you follow him in particular, when a company has, a vulnerability to their product or website or something, sometimes it's hard for researchers to get a hold of that company, or that company will act in ways that aren't considered best practices in the security industry. And what somebody has come up with is if you have the security.txt file, it's in the process of becoming a standard on how the format is, but it's basically how should you interact with this company when it comes to a security issue that you found, for that company, that company to respond back to you in an appropriate way. So from his perspective, he has plenty of examples on his blog about how he's tried to reach out to companies and they just blow him off or take it out of proportion or block him on social media and then proceed to make other errors. So if you and your company have this security.txt file, it's, one of the ways just to make this whole process of, reporting issues to your products a lot easier and make sure that they happen in correct ways.
The problem is the companies that are not taking him seriously are not going to have a security.txt, right?
Oh, exactly. But, it's one of those things like, it took a while for like robots.txt and some of these other standards to kind of go around too. So eventually, hopefully it'll get around to a lot more places.
Well, the nice thing is like Google and Bing have web crawlers, and they will, there's like a webmaster dashboard that you can access, and they will give you warnings like this, and they will say, hey, you're missing this file and this is pretty critical. So that'd be great for them to start checking for this and sort of issue a warning, like, hey, help your customers, know how to report security issues. Because security is kind of a big deal these days. Go figure. Okay, so last one here. Key iPhone source code gets posted online in biggest leak in history. And of course, by the time I went out to GitHub, the source code was gone because it was taken down with a DMCA takedown notice.
Yeah, so there was a bunch of people that, we were talking to that were like, oh, this was for iOS 9, so that's not big of a deal. But, for something that is as big and is been around as long as the iPhone, some of those things don't change all that much, or if they do, there's good portions of it that, are going to go untouched between releases. So even though this was 2 versions of iOS ago, this was for the bootloader. It's a pretty significant part of the phone itself. So, taking it on a little bit lighter side, somebody who had gotten a look at the code noticed that going back to one of our favorite debates here, that the leaked code contained mixes of tabs and spaces in it.
Nice. So it's just a mess. So they are human over there apparently. It's really interesting. It was like taken down right away, and I just kind of wanted to see what that kind of code would look like. But I don't know. It's probably better that I didn't see it anyway. Okay, so let's move on because I want to talk about the desktop bridge because this is such a cool technology. So Stefan, I think where we wanted to start was kind of, we had John Sheehan on. Was that 2 years ago, Carl?
3 years ago. Build 2015.
Holy cow. Almost 3 years ago. And, he walked us through Centennial, and that was before it was basically available at the time. But can you kind of give us a history of like what's happened in the past couple of years?
Yeah. 2015 was, when we first talked about it at Build. And then in 2016, we actually released it as part of the anniversary update. We called it Project Centennial at the time before we shipped it. Now we typically refer to it as the Windows Desktop Bridge. So what it really is with the Desktop Bridge, we have extended the Windows 10 platform to give all Win32 apps a great path forward. And the reason really is because we love all the code that developers have written for Windows all the apps that they have created, whether those are new apps for Windows 10 created specifically, or apps they have written, on Windows 7 or even earlier. We love all that code, and we want to enable them to have a great path forward on Windows 10 for all their existing code, their existing skills, all the investments, and want to make able they can modernize them easily on Windows 10 without having to do any kind of rewrite. Remember, Windows 8. When we introduced the new app model for Windows, was a beautiful thing, beautiful app model. Back in the day, our story for developers was, hey, yeah, you can rewrite all your code and then you get all the benefits of this app model. Of course, that wasn't, very well received by all existing developers who had existing investments and existing apps. Doing a full rewrite, is never a good story for a developer. With the desktop bridge, we now have a great story where you can incrementally adopt new features on Windows 10, incrementally modernize your application at your own pace.
Yeah, and as a user, I mean, it's funny, we always think of it from the developer perspective, but man, as a user, it is so awesome. Like I was, I usually never install Spotify, but when Spotify became, basically centennialized, or, was used the desktop bridge and was available then in the store, I love it because I can just say, like, give me that, and I can get it. I don't have to deal with an installer. I mean, I think installers are just, I don't like the next, and, hopefully don't click, look for check boxes that are going to do evil things or things like that. So I think it's a much better user experience.
Exactly. The user experience for the installation certainly is a lot better. You get seamless updates automatically from the store. And you can do clean uninstalls of the application if you no longer want it. You probably all remember times where you installed, an MSI or other classic application. You didn't want it at some point, you uninstalled it, but your system was never the same again because something was left behind that was still, messing with other applications. So those are all things of the past. With applications moving to the modern deployment stack, Windows takes care of, clean install, update, and uninstall, so we can always guarantee a good system health. Mm-hmm. There's also a number of other benefits that you get from that the user gets from your application being centennialized. Your app has an identity, so the system actually knows about it. We can surface it in the user settings on Windows 10, so you have more options there to control your application, to reset it, and do things like that. Also, another important thing we're doing with the desktop bridge is we are not only isolating your installation footprint on the system, we're also moving all system interactions out of proc, which means all your integrations that classic apps would do, for example, with Explorer.exe that used to happen in proc, we're now doing out of proc. So if the third-party application has a bug or crashes every once in a while, it will not take down Explorer or important parts of the system or the shell. So that's actually interesting data. The Explorer team once did an analysis and found that like 98% of their Explorer crashes are actually from third-party code that integrates, with some like 20-old-year interfaces with Explorer. And so whenever they have a bug, Explorer crashes and the user has a pretty terrible Windows experience. Now, with desktop bridge applications, all these integration points are moved out of proc. So even if your app crashes, your system is still healthy and continues working.
Yeah.
So looking at the developer side of this, this is a technology that I've really followed since our first discussion that we had with John Sheehan. Initially there was a way that you could, take your MSI and you run a process and it'll figure out, how to package that up. You could also do like an AppX package and with a handwritten AppX manifest to do it. And recently there's also a Windows app packaging project to do this. So am I missing any technologies like how I can get my old code over into a store ready state?
Yeah, so there are several ways to do that. You've already listed a couple of them. First of all, you can do it manually. If you are like a hardcore, Notepad command line type of guy, you can just take your existing Win32 binaries and author an AppX manifest. Put all the binaries and assets in the right place, and then run the make AppX tool, and off you go. You're ready to submit to the store. That's more like for people who absolutely know what they're doing and want to have that level of control. For the typical developer who is maybe a little more lazy, there's a number of great tools available out there today. You mentioned the desktop app converter. This is kind of our sort of a default tool that the platform team makes available to the community. It actually is available in the store. So what we've done, we've ran the desktop app converter on the desktop app converter, and then we put it in the store. So that's a true story. And so that's kind of the standard tool where you can feed it, either your MSI or your Xcopy installer, or you can point it at just a folder of loose files, and the tool will create a Windows store or a Windows app package for you that you can distribute via store or distribute via sideload and other means in your enterprise, for example. But there's a lot more that has evolved since then. We now have also great support in IDEs for developers. So, of course, in Visual Studio with the I think update 4 for Visual Studio 2017, we now have the packaging project, which is a great tool, very easy to use. If you have any existing Win32 project going on in Visual Studio, any WinForms project, WPF, MFC, you name it, you can just add this packaging project to the solution, point it at your application project, and then you get all the same sort of packaging support that you already know from UWP. So you can edit the manifest in the Visual Studio manifest editor. You can manage your assets for icons and things like that. And you can just, create the store package right there in Visual Studio associated with your Dev Center account, and basically do your app store submission right there. This is Visual Studio. Also, our friends over at Embarcadero have added similar support to Rad Studio. So if you're using that for your Delphi or C++ projects, you have that there as well. And then also there is the important installer ecosystem with folks like Flexera, FireGiant, Advanced Installer, Installerware, Pace. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anyone here. They have all picked up this technology over the last year or two and added great support in their tooling to also produce Windows app packages. So those are great solutions if you have a project that you still want to target Windows 7, so you want to produce an MSI for that, but you also want to take advantage of new features on Windows 10. You can use the same tool, and from the same code base, same binaries, you produce a Windows app package, and you'll get a much better experience on Windows 10.
Oh, that's a great point.
Don't wait for users to report problems. Raygun gives you complete visibility on errors, crashes, and performance problems affecting your end users. Replicate issues in seconds rather than digging through log files or having to rely on users to report errors or crashes. Raygun gives you a window into how users are really experiencing your software applications, supports all major programming languages and platforms, and integrates with your current development workflow tools too. There's a free 14-day trial, and it takes minutes to implement. So start resolving issues in your application and check it out today at raygun.com. Yeah, so I wanted to pause a little bit on the Windows app packaging project, because that's kind of the impetus for why we invited you here. Is I had this old application. Essentially, all it does is I have the problem where I have bad typing style, and whenever I reach for the A, I just mash the caps lock key. So then I wrote an app that hooked into the keyboard with some Win32 APIs and just prevented that from happening. And because of that, I could never make a UWP app out of that. But I really wanted to get this into the store, but I didn't want a lot of work. I didn't want to go through just a ton of stuff to make this happen. I didn't want to write installers. So that's part of the reason why I've been following the desktop bridge so much, is because I have a few other apps that are in this class that I really wanted to get into the store. So last December, I actually spun up the Windows app packaging project, and I think it's almost simpler than, kind of how you stated. I added this project to my solution. It had that AppX manifest. The hardest part for me was updating all my icons, to be honest, and it pointed to the other project and it just built. It was so simple. I just want to get, pause and give you and your team and everybody who's worked on this just a lot of kudos, because it really is reminiscent of that old installer project that Visual Studio used to have, except way, way easier, because you don't have to deal with all the things that it could do.
Yeah.
And now I have all the benefits of the store. It's up in the store. I get the differential, when I update it, it does just downloads the diffs. If I uninstall it, it's gone. You don't have to worry about it. But I still get all the cool things that a Win32 app can do, like system tray integration and all that other pieces there. So, I just wanted to comment how easy this is to use. And if anybody is doubtful, just update to the right version of Visual Studio, like you mentioned, update 4 for 2017, and try it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, great to hear that you had a good experience with it.
Yeah. I love the apps. Like, I mentioned Spotify, but then like Paint.net is another one. So yeah, anybody who's listening, like I encourage you to get your app into the store, because that makes it 100% more likely that I'm actually going to use it. So when you actually build the project and you try to submit it to the store, Carl was telling me that that will actually give you an error by default. There's like a different process you have to go through. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's correct. So all the projects that get converted with the desktop bridge, they need to declare a special capability, because those apps are more powerful than your standard UWP application. They have access to all the public Windows APIs as opposed to just the UWP subset. So in order to still guarantee, make all the store guarantees for our users, we require a slightly different onboarding process where we, work with you through the onboarding. We'll take, a look at, what the app does and how it does it. And so those are all, pretty much standard procedures by now. I mean, we've opened the store up, I think, in September 2016 for these kind of apps. And, back in the day, we were learning how to do that. So now, 18 months later or something like that, this is, working pretty well, and we have it fairly streamlined, but there's still kind of the extra sort of process we want to follow. So there is kind of a sign up website that we can probably share in the notes here, where you kind of submit, a few pieces of information, like, what is your app, and who are you, and then someone from Microsoft will directly work with you and from start to finish for your submission.
Okay.
And along the process, you'll get to learn some really great folks there from Microsoft. So all the guys from our App Consult team who are working this progress, they're all excellent guys to work with. So
okay.
Yeah. So, I look at, this desktop bridge, it's a way for me to take all my existing code, and I have an AppX now, which, leads me into getting more capabilities than the Win32 apps had. So can I start adding UWP features to this legacy app that I have?
Yeah, exactly. That is one of the main advantages for developers. Once you've done the steps and you get the immediate benefits of deployment and better user experience. But now, since your app has identity, we can also give it access to all the new Windows 10 features and APIs. So you can easily integrate with things like Windows Hello, with Cortana. Literally, you have access to the entire UWP API surface and feature set. So there's some APIs that require your app to have a core window like the modern UI controls. So those currently you are not able to host them in your VB6 process or in your MFC process or something like that. So for that, you do have the option though to spin up a core window view, like an additional view in your Win32 package that could then host modern UI. Or you also have the option to actually replace your current UI with a complete modern UI, but still retain all your sort of backend code in Win32 that maybe does your system tray integration or does some other things that you weren't able to do in the UWP. So you can kind of mix and match these things and get the best feature set from both the Win32 and the UWP world in your app package.
Very cool. Very cool. And then going back to what you were mentioning earlier, you're mentioning the submission process being more mature now. Carl was mentioning that it mentioned that he was an early adopter of it. So what is what does that mean?
Okay. Does it still say that?
Yes.
Did it say that in December when you did? Okay.
Yes.
I think that's probably just a bug. So I don't think we should say that anymore. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So I will have a chat with the store folks and see if we can change the wording on that one.
Live bug tracking on the MSDev show.
So speaking of the store, folks, is there a place in the store where I can see a collection of apps that have gone through the desktop bridge?
That's a great question. So in general, the way we are presenting apps to the end user, we don't want to make a distinction like, hey, this is a UWP app and this is a desktop bridge app. Those are all Windows apps, and an end user should not really care about what is the packaging detail or the implementation detail of a given app. So for them, they just see apps, from the Windows Store for their device. If you are, curious when you install an app and you want to know, hey, is this a desktop bridge app? The way to detect it is on the product description page in the store. If you look into the capability section, this is where an app discloses all its capabilities. And desktop bridge apps have the entry there that says, I think it says, uses all system resources, which is kind of the human readable version of run full trust, which is the technical name of the capability. So that's a way how you could detect it if you wanted to see it for a given app. But for a user, those are all just apps. And also keep in mind that our model now allows you to have an app package that has some full trust Win32 components and some UWP components, all mix and match in the same package. So for some of these apps, you can't really say, hey, this is a UWP app or this is a desktop bridge app. It can be sort of a hybrid of both. So that would be my answer. I know there's also, I think, a collection that the store team put together that's called something like Powerful Desktop Apps, where they started highlighting some of the desktop bridge apps. But that will only give you a very small window in the full set of applications that we have onboarded by now. So it has really picked up a lot of steam in the last 6 months or in the last year.
It's still blowing my mind that the desktop app converter is like in there in the store. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but it's kind of like wrapping your head around, C# being compiled by a C# compiler, or, written in C#. So, and then what about, if I put an app in the store, what about monetizing it? Or does it all work the same?
Yeah, exactly. So it works exactly the same way as for a UWP. So you get all the same monetization methods. You can have trials. You can have paid apps. You can use advertisement. Also, recently, the store team enabled subscription based monetization for applications. So that's available as well, both for UWP and desktop bridge applications.
Okay.
Or the other big advantage, of course, that we should mention here, if you monetize through the Microsoft Store, then you don't have to worry about taking people's credit cards and dealing with like international payment methods. So you automatically get all the payment methods that are used in, I think, 250 markets or some number like that across the world, and you can make your app available in the markets you choose, obviously, but you don't have to worry about, hey, what's a common payment method in the Netherlands, for example.
Cool.
I believe I just saw another recent store capability around pricing that you can do per market specific pricing now. So instead of just selecting it from a drop down, I could say, well, in China, instead of charging the 8 won or for the local currency, because that's for the drop down, I can do 7.77 because that's a very lucky number there. So I might get more people to download because I can get very specific with my pricing.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, cool.
So is there anything else that we missed or that we should talk about the desktop bridge?
Well, I think we're still making more improvements to it. So it's like with every release since the anniversary update, we've added great new capabilities, better tooling, and we'll keep improving things here. So definitely stay tuned. On like the Windows Dev blog and also upcoming announcements here. We want to make it even easier than it is today. Also to kind of make the adoption of new Windows 10 features in your Win32 applications really kind of like a no-brainer and as easy as possible. Like one of the things I mentioned earlier, today, if you want to use modern UI in your Win32 process, it's not really that easy, or you have to spin up your own modern view for that. So we're looking at making it possible to use all the new UI goodness, some of the fluent design elements, also more directly from your Win32 application. So it's really kind of an easy pay for play for developers. They don't have to learn a ton of new concepts. They can just easily adopt new features with just a couple of lines of code.
Very cool. Great stuff. Yeah. It's great to see the trend, having John on 3 years ago and then talking about it now. It's amazing the level of maturity that has come about over the past couple of years. It's awesome to see. Okay. So we don't have any tips of the week, so we will jump into the game that we play. So what I need you to do, Stefan, is pick a number between 1 and 4, except for 3, because I'm out of 3s. And then tell me what it is.
Okay. 2.
Okay, it's a kid's game here, so I'll find you a 2. Let's see. I found one. Okay. Would you rather share your entire home with a huge dairy cow or with 5 large, playful seagulls?
Whoa. I would probably pick the cow, I think.
Well, the good thing about the cow, if you have a 2-story house, is the cow, I think, would stay on the same story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's an advantage.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh, the seagulls would poop everywhere, but so would the cow.
True. Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. I think it would
There's no good winner for that one.
Yeah. You'd want to control the diet of that cow for sure. Okay, let me cross that off so we don't do that question again. And Carl, pick a number.
I'll do number 1.
Number 1. Okay, what do we got here? Number one. Okay, here we go. I think we did that one for sure. So let me pick another number 1 here. It's getting harder and harder. I got to buy that book that has all the questions in it. Okay, here we go. Would you rather live, this seems so easy. Would you rather live next to a garbage dump or next to an old Indian burial ground?
Old Indian burial ground.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems like a really easy question. Like, and I like how you always have to specify that it's an Indian burial ground for some reason. As if that's somehow different. Okay, perfect. that was uneventful. Okay, so Stefan, where can people find you?
Yeah, Twitter is probably a good place to find me. My handle is Stefan Wick Dev,
Okay.
so it should be pretty easy. Please hit me up there. I'm happy to answer any questions about Desktop Bridge.
Awesome. And then I know that Carl has collected a whole bunch of links for basically sessions on the Desktop Bridge, as well as the link to allow you to get started. And Carl, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Carl Schweitzer.
And you can find me at Twitter at twitter.com/ytechie. So Stefan, thank you so much for coming on here and talking about the Windows Desktop Bridge. This is really cool technology that I think all Windows developers should be taking a look at.
Thanks for having me.